was talking to a missionary one time. This has been several years ago. We were at the General Baptist Summit, and I had an opportunity to talk to one of the missionaries there. And he was telling me that they had went and served, and he was stationed there, but they had a team come there, and they were serving rice and feeding the kids and the families that were there. And it said that they had all these bags of rice and this great big long line of people that were all coming up to grab their portion of rice. And even then, like, other people were cutting in to get their seconds, like their second serving before other people, and they were seeing this and noticing it. But as they were doing it, they said it was so hard to not just go ahead and give them the rice, even though they had already gotten some, because they knew good and well that they went home and gave it to someone and then came back for their own share. So they said they continued, just everyone who got in line, they started giving it out. And there was still this really long line. They had gone through all of these bags of rice, and there was one bag that was left. And they looked at each other because they saw how fast all these other bags left and were gone and were finished. And they had this moment where all the missionaries that were there, short-term and long-term, were there praying over this bag of rice, saying, God, multiply it in a way so that we can see more and more people so that this line will not go hungry. And as they did, they kept scooping it out. And long and behold, hundreds of people came and were fed from this one bag. And the bag, when they looked at it after everyone had been fed, was still at the same level that it was before they prayed. And this is a real story of something that we're actually talking about. So week number 3 of our Miracles series, where we've been looking into a few of the miracles of Jesus, seeing how these miracles point us to Jesus, but also inform us about the kingdom of God. Because as we've said in the past couple weeks, that John doesn't necessarily call them miracles, he calls them signs, because signs point us somewhere and inform us about something. Week 1 was water into wine. Last week was the healing at the pool of Bethesda. If you're interested in those are both online as well, for you to go back and listen to as many times or as few times as you would like. But today, we actually have it jam-packed with 2 different miracles that are very similar, and they're so similar to the point that some people think that this is a retelling of the same story, just in a different context, but it's actually 2 different accounts. And because it's 2 different accounts, that's what makes it so great for us, which we'll get to in a little bit. But Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 30, we have the feeding of the 5,000. It says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told them all that they had done and taught. When he came to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away on the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns to get there ahead of him. And when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd. He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, this is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy them something to eat. But when he answered them, he said, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, said a blessing, and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And when they all ate, they were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. Now, I don't know if any of you had this experience in elementary school and even in middle school, sometimes in high school, but I always brought my own lunch to school. And there was a reason for this. One, I didn't like the school food. I tried it, didn't like it. So I had Mom always pack my lunch before we'd leave. So I'd get this packed lunch. And when we would go there, I would be able to eat whatever I wanted, whatever my mom fixed me, whether it was good or not. Like, I was going to eat it because Mom worked really hard to pack it. And the second reason that I love to start bringing my lunch is not just because I didn't like the school food, but because I found out if mom packed something really good, I could trade it for something better. So I would go there and I would never trade down. Like this was an unspoken rule. You never traded down. If you had like a little Debbie cake and someone offered you one French fry, you're not taking that French fry. You're going to keep your Debbie cake until they offer something a little bit better. So there became like this little transaction. In John's account of this story, he says that these 5 loaves and 2 fish come from a boy who offered up his lunch. And in his lunchbox, there was 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And this is actually the first act of obedience. You see, one, this boy is not giving up something in hopes that he will return something better, like many of us did in elementary school and even do in our adult life too. But he gave it up because Jesus asked him to. So he's just walking by. He has these 5 loaves, these 2 fish, and he's just minding his own business. And then the disciples of Jesus say, hey, Jesus, the Messiah, he needs this. He needs this because we got to feed all these people. And I imagine the little boys looking out and saying, you're going to need a lot more than 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed all of these people, because it's 5,000 men, not including their wives and their children. So when they were counting, they weren't counting all the women and the kids as well. It was just the men. So there's 5,000 men, plus there's families. They're all here listening to Jesus. They're all hungry. They've been spending all day not eating at all just because they loved what Jesus was teaching. And this little boy comes up and he's like, this is all I've got, but here you go. I'll give it up to you. And this first act of obedience was not only because he was asked, but because he saw a need and filled that need. He saw that the crowd was hungry too. And when asked, does anyone have any bread? Does anyone have something to eat? This little boy, I imagine he ran up and he's like, it's not a lot, but here's all I got. Here's all I got. So it may not have been much, and it definitely wasn't enough to feed everyone, but he gave all that he was able. And what Jesus does is he multiplies it, provides for the crowd. In Mark chapter 6, we'll read it again. He commanded them all to sit down in groups. So seeing these 5,000 people, he sits them down in groups of 100 or 50. And he takes the 5 loaves out of this boy's lunchbox, looks up to heaven, says a blessing, breaks it, gives it to the disciples, and they start passing it out to all the people. He does the same thing with the fish. And then in verse 42, they all ate and were satisfied. Now this is highly reflective, at least in my opinion, of Psalm 23. Psalm 23, verse 1 says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You see, right here in this story, Jesus is telling us about himself that he is the good shepherd who's going to come and make sure that all of the people that are under his teaching will not want or desire anything than what he's given him. So he's given them teaching, but he's also going to make sure that they have enough to where they don't want to eat anymore because they have all that they need. And then in verse 2, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Well, what's he do in verse 39 of Mark 6? Commands them all to sit down on green grass. So he goes, hey, I'm the Lord's shepherd. I am the good shepherd. I'm going to provide all of your needs, and I'm going to lie you down on green grass, on green pastures, lead you beside the still waters. Why? So that I can restore your soul. So just as Jesus in this miracle is restoring their appetite, in the spiritual side of things, what Jesus is doing and revealing about himself in the kingdom is that he is the one who will provide and restore and refresh our soul so that we are satisfied, where our soul is refreshed and restored, and he will lead us into paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So even in those first 3 verses of Psalm 23, you're seeing this play out in this miracle. Jesus is literally, not that Psalm 23 is necessarily prophecy, but he's literally showing and demonstrating, this is who I am. Now here's where he leads the path of leads them into passive righteousness for his namesake. It's not just because he had been spending all day teaching, which surely was leading them to righteousness, but it's also the symbolism behind the bread and the fish. There's 5 loaves of bread, and these 5 loaves of bread would represent the 5 books of Torah, or the law of Moses, that he came to fulfill the law. So with these 5 loaves of bread, it wasn't by accident. This little boy probably didn't even think anything about it, but the 5 loaves would represent all of the law of Moses that Jesus said he came to fulfill. He didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. So he's saying, as I'm breaking this bread and sending it out, I'm showing all of these people that I'm here to fulfill the law of Moses. That they're not going to be under this old covenant with the law, but they're going to be under this new covenant that Jesus restores and satisfies. And then you've got the 2 fish, which is the Psalms and the prophets. So where the Psalms will talk a little bit prophetically about Jesus, but then also all of the prophets will talk about Jesus as well. He's saying, I came not only to fulfill the law, but to fulfill all of the prophecies, to fulfill the law and the prophets. And then the 12 baskets represent the 12 tribes of Israel. So when you've got Israel, they connect themselves with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not Abraham, Ishmael, or Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. It's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because Jacob was the one that received that blessing, and then he had 12 children. These 12 sons, he had 12 sons. He probably had some daughters too, but he had 12 sons, and these 12 sons would be the name of each of the tribes of Israel. So when you're connecting with your family line, which was very important for them, their ancestry line, that if you were a child of God, you had to come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then one of Jacob's sons. So if you're of the tribe of Judah, that meant that you were in the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Judah, right? So these 12 tribes of Israel are highly symbolic simply because where they're located in this particular miracle in Mark chapter 6, they're in a desolate place, which means they're in some sort of like wilderness, but they're on Israel's property. So they're still in the nation of Israel. And this is where Jesus is preaching and teaching. All of these Israelites are coming here, and this represents all the 12 tribes of Israel. Then you fast forward to Mark chapter 8, where you see this very similar miracle. It says, in those days, when again a great crowd had gathered, they had nothing to eat. He called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from afar away. And his disciples answered him, how can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? And he asked them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. He directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. He took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave it to his disciples to set before the people, and they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish. Having blessed them, he said that these should also be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied. And they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And there were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away. Now here's the differences. Here's why this is 2 different occasions, and then I'll get to why this is important for us. So in those days, or when you're looking at these 2 stories, there's several differences. One is that in verse 1, he says again. So again, there's another great crowd. And this indicates that it's a separate event. But if that doesn't convince you, like it doesn't convince some people, he has compassion on them. He's been with them for 3 days instead of just 1 day. He's seen them come hungry from their homes. I'm kind of walking through Scripture a little bit right now. And then it gets to how many loaves there are. Now, first, there was 5 loaves and 2 fish. This time, there's 7 loaves and just a few small fish. Now, you might think, okay, well, the 7 represents the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and they're just saying we have 7 items of food. This isn't true. It is saying there are 7 loaves of bread, and then a little bit later, they find that they have a few small fish. The similarities, it's very common, is that he takes what they have, he multiplies it, and feeds a lot of people. The first instance, it was recorded as 5,000. This one was recorded as 4,000. And since they come from the same gospel, it's unlikely that John Mark, the author of the book of Mark, would have said the same story so close to each other. Now, here is why it's important that these are two separate accounts. Because as I said, with the feeding of the 5,000, that was for the tribes of Israel. Now, I don't know how many of you have Jewish ancestry lines, but I would assume that most of you don't. This is why it's important. Because the 7 loaves and the 7 baskets represents the 7 continents on the world. So there's all of these different pieces of bread. These 7 loaves represent that Jesus did not come just for the Israelites, just for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles. And there could be an argument made that the 2 fish also represented not just the law and the prophets, not just the Psalms and the prophets, but that those 2 fish represented the Jews and the Gentiles alike. That not only would the Jewish people be given this salvation from God, but they would also commune and be grafted in with the Gentiles. And this is why it's important for us as those who aren't Jewish. This gives us hope, because not only did Jesus come for his people, the Israelites, that for the people of Israel, for the Jewish, but he came for us as well. And Gentiles is just a blanket term for anyone who's not of the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this means that he came to break his body, to break the bread, and distribute it among people who would accept his teaching and his fulfillment of the word. These 2 stories, Jesus came to break his body and distribute it among the people. And when he got all of the baskets full, he got 12 baskets full of broken bread and 7 baskets full of broken bread, representing the brokenness of people that he came to save. So all these baskets that were given back to him were all broken. But Jesus came to restore them, to refresh their soul. And so all who call on the name of the Lord would receive the satisfaction of the bread of life, which is their salvation. So you think about how even when we're looking at communion, it's symbolic of Jesus shedding his blood, breaking his body, and giving himself up. If you'll notice in this passage too, this stays very consistent with that of Jesus was not overcome by the Romans. As much as the world would love for you to believe that, Jesus was not overcome by the Romans. Jesus had all the power that he had, and he could have had very, very much the capability to release himself from their captivity. Whether it be by the way that he talked or taught, or whether it be by some miraculous sign showing and proving that he is God and he is the Messiah. But instead, he gave himself up. Just like in this passage and even in the communion story, he broke his own bread. It wasn't the disciples he didn't give it to the disciples and have the disciples break the bread. He broke the bread. He blessed it as a symbol that he gave himself up. That it wasn't these Romans, it wasn't these other people that held him, it wasn't the Pharisees that arrested him, it wasn't those people that said, we're coming to kill Jesus. It was Jesus himself saying, it's okay. Let him have Barabbas. Let him put me in custody. Let me walk with the cross for over a mile. Let me be nailed to the cross. If it all means that these baskets of bread, of broken pieces, would be restored and redeemed by my word and by my life. This is the message, and this is what it's pointing to. And here's where I want you to take a little bit of an action step today. Every single one of us. You know, we look at this story and we're like, Jesus is doing miracles, but without the acts of obedience, just as we've talked about with the other 2. If it wasn't for the servants who went and filled up the water for the water to be turned into wine. If it wasn't for the man who, in his own free will, decided to follow what Jesus said, to act in obedience and take up his mat and walk, knowing good and well that it was the Sabbath. And if it wasn't for this little boy who saw this need and was asked, do you have anything to eat? Because all I have is 5 loaves and 2 fish. This means that each and every one of us, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. We have things in our life that we could give up, but we haven't. We have our 5 loaves and our 2 fish, and God is waiting and asking you, I've got people who are hungry for the word, hungry for salvation. What are you going to do with those 5 loaves and those 2 fish? What are you going to do with it? For me, as Stephanie said, I know she was going to do that. I appreciate that, by the way. But I was debating on whether or not I was going to share this or not, and Stephanie kind of shared it for me, so I'm going to continue to share it. Thanks. So I'm going on this mission trip, and when I was asked months and months ago if I would go on this, I told my uncle, I was like, I'm going to need to pray about this, because I'm going to need a clear sign for me to actually want to go on a mission field. And it's not that I don't care for global missions, so don't think that. When you hear that, I care very deeply about global missions, but I also know that my calling is here. And I've been very comfortable and solid in that calling, that I'm called here to the United States, not for global missions. Even when, and I've shared this before, when we do spiritual gifting tests, and I've done them, every single time that I've done them, hospitality is the lowest, and then I've got evangelism right under there, and then apostleship is right above evangelism as the top 3 lowest in my life. And apostleship means global missions. It means your willingness to go and be a missionary, either full-time or part-time or short-term or whatever it is, to go and do that. So those 3 are not my gifting, right? Those are things that I really have to work on. And leading up to this whole thing, I have felt deep inside of me that I was supposed to be really excited about this, and I haven't been the entire time. Like, as I'm preparing, because it's not just the normal type of typical mission trip that you're thinking of. Like, this mission trip is, I'm going to help lead a pastor's conference, I'm going to help lead a marriage conference, and I'm going to help lead a leadership conference for the college that's in the Philippines. So it's been a lot of work on the back end of things going into this, of I've got to have this content that's going to, basically not be a sermon, but teach them something for 40 minutes across all of these different ones, across different sessions for each of these conferences. And it's been a lot, because I'm also preaching here, and I'm also doing things for ministry here. And as I'm working on all of these things, I'm starting to I'll have moments where I'm like, okay, I'm really excited to share this word with people. And there's one in particular that I'm not going to share with you, but I've shared with Chloe, like this message, this teaching that I'm going to give to people in the Philippines, specifically at the General Baptist Bible College. I'm pumped to give that message. Not because I think it's just going to be super impressive or anything, but I think it's because it's what they need to hear. And as I've been working through this, I've had the doubts, I've had the enemy come and attack me. But the one thing that has remained a very constant is that I am not thrilled to be going on this trip. But I'm willing. And this is where I'm not saying this to make myself seem great, because any other person up here would tell you, I'm just so thrilled to go to the Philippines. I'm not. I don't want to go. Like, if I had an option and I could back out today, and God was like, back out if you want to, I'd be like, all right, sorry guys, you're just going to have to fill in my sessions or just take them out. But I'm willing, because I know that I have 5 loaves and 2 fish. And these 5 loaves and 2 fish, as much as I want to keep those here in the States, there are people who need this. And I'm just trusting that with what little I have to actually give and contribute to this trip, that God is going to multiply it. And it's going to impact not just them, but for generations to come. I think about that little boy, and he gave this 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he saw Jesus multiply what little he had to offer up. And I believe for generations, this little boy would go and tell his son and say, I remember when Jesus, the Messiah, was here. I saw him on the cross. I wept over him because I saw how much he cared about his people. I saw how much he multiplied everything, what little I had to give. He multiplied everything. And, son, I just want to tell you to trust in Jesus. And then when he had a grandson, he goes to his grandson. He's like, I remember when Jesus was here. And then his son would tell their grandchildren and say, I remember when my dad saw Jesus do this through him. Right? This fishes and loaves is not just a single moment, but this lasted for generations, for 5,000 people and for 4,000 people. That because of that one moment where Jesus says, I'm going to use what little this boy has to go and give it to people so that 5,000 people would come to know who I was. And you have your fishes and loaves. And let's be honest, you look at your fishes and loaves and you say, maybe I'll just give 10% of this. Maybe I'll just give 10% of my finances. Maybe I'll just give 10% of my time, and I'll tithe in that way. And God is saying, no, I want all of it. I want your whole life. Because this is not just for you in this generation. This will last for generations to come. What we're doing here at Shady Grove with the new building project, what we're doing here with the kids ministry, what we're doing here with Harvest Days and other things that we have throughout our calendar year is not just for this generation to enjoy. This is moments for us to say, I may not have a lot to give, but here it is. You know, as a young pastor and leading up to this trip even too, I say this with a lot of caution, but leading up to this and being a young pastor, I'm constantly told, whether you believe it or not, I'm constantly told that I don't have a lot to give. Because I don't have a lot of experience in ministry. I don't have a lot of experience being, a parent or being a husband. I don't have a lot of experience, so I don't have a lot to offer. And that's been a constant thing throughout the past probably 7 or 8 months that I've been preparing for this trip. And I had to come to a moment where I wasn't allowing the enemy to come to me and say, you know what, these people have a lot more to give, and these people would be able to do a whole lot better than you, so just let those people do it and don't let you do it. Like, you don't have to do it because they'll do so much better. And all I had to do was come to my own conclusion and say, hey, they may have 10 loaves and 500 fish with them. I've still got my 5 and 2. But God didn't tell me to sacrifice my 5 and 2 for myself. So what little experience and what little I have to offer in the eyes of people, God will multiply greatly. So I say that as an encouragement to you. You may not feel like you have a lot. When we start fundraising for this building project, you may not feel like you have a lot to give. But what I believe that God is going to do is multiply that for generations to come, that you're not giving to give just here and now for this church here and now, but you're giving so that it will last for generations. That your gift, small or large, will give a generational impact. And as we start doing this, I'm going to share this too. I kind of came, as I was praying for how we were going to start doing this, and I don't know why God's choosing to do it now, but I feel like he is when we start fundraising, and I mean, we can start fundraising at any moment. We just don't know how much it's going to cost. And that's where we're at right now. We don't know how much this building is going to cost, but I know that what God has spoken to me is that we need to have at least 40% raised up. So whatever the total cost is, we need to have 40%. And it's not just me coming up with some number like to be, oh, great, 40% sounds really good. Like, let's just do that. 40% comes from the symbolism of what 40 is. 40 in Scripture represents a generation. And so what we can do is give what God gives us in our generation. So this generation of this church right here and now is going to give all that we can in this generation, trusting that God is going to provide for the 60, which is another generation and then some. So what we are going to contribute for this new building, it's not just about having some fancy new building. It's about creating more space for people to come and know who Jesus is and have real relationships with godly people. And so we are going to raise up 40% because this is all that we can give in this generation, and we're going to trust that God's going to provide the 60% just as he provides for the generations that come after us. And it all starts with our fishes and loaves. So what I want to ask you today as I close is, what are those fishes and loaves that you have in your life that you know God is calling you to give up, and you've been really stingy about it? Because those 5 loaves are yours. Those 2 fish, they're yours. But God is saying, just let me use it and watch the impact.